All right. Good morning. This is Tracy Peterson with Utah Grants, and we are going to go over the Title I application forms. So the Title I data forms have been programmed into Utah Grants, and the application owner completes and submits the application package for approval, including the forms. So I am logged in our testing site as Beaver School District as Randy Hunter. So this will not affect anything with Beaver School District in any sort of way. Again, this is on a testing site to show you, give you an example of how these forms work. So I'm going to go to Applications, and then on my left, I'm going to click on Pending Tasks. And as I do so, it shows you all the applications that are currently available for me to apply for. We're specifically doing Title I today, so I'm going to come down here to 20T1FT, and this one's called Title I Part A 2020. That is not what you're going to see inside of Utah Grants. You're going to see 20T1FT Title 1A, and I think it might say revised after it. As I click the green play button here on the right, it will start the application. I will get this confirmation email message. It says, "Are you sure you want to start this application?" And I'm going to say yes. So as I click yes, I become the owner of this application. We're going to wait just a moment for the system to start to work. It's thinking. Go. All right. Okay, so we are inside the application. I'm not going to go over today the project abstract, the budget narrative, or putting in the budgets. There's instructions out there that you can locate and do that, and hopefully you already have that handled. We are going to specifically talk about the forms, so I'm going to attachments right here, and as you notice here, we've got data forms. So we are going to talk about the first two here. This is a testing site, and we have this MOE form. This is a form you are not going to see on your application, so please ignore that for today's purposes. We're going to start with the Title I forms. So I'm going to click on the blue pencil here on the right. In our instructions, we've asked you to click on the green eye. It's okay to click the green eye or the blue pencil. They will both do the exact same thing. They will get you inside the form where you can make edits and adjustments that can be submitted back with your application. All right. So as we get in here, the Title I forms bundle is made up of three related subforms. We have the launch building eligibility form, we have the set-asides form, and we have the school allocation form. These forms have to be done in order as you see here: building eligibility, set-asides, and school allocation. If at any point in time, if you need to change something on the building eligibility and you've completed the other two forms, you will have to go back in and mark them, the other two forms complete. So again, they have to be done in order. You can go back and edit, but you just have to remark as complete if you make changes. So if we're going to first click on this launch building eligibility form, it's blue, so it's a link. So I'm going to click on it. And it's going to take us inside the form. So Beaver School District is smaller. It is a smaller school district. So it doesn't have as many schools as you see here as maybe some of the others that are located throughout Utah. What we're going to do here is to make edits to this. We're going to click on the blue buttons over here on our right. So just a couple brief explanation about this form. Here you've got the school number here on the far left, the school name, and these are schools specific to Beaver School District, the grade span, and then this information in enrollment, low-income student number, and low-income student percent. These are things that are provided that that the State Board of Education loads into this system. And what we've allowed you to do now is through these other columns to the right is to edit, not to edit, but to make adjustments or to change it a little bit in regards to what's happening now. So to do that, we're going to click on the blue pencil, as I said before, and you can see that those fields open up. And I'm just going to click the blue pencil on every single one of these to just play around with it today. Okay, so the non-public low-income student number, this is where you would enter the number of non-public students in the service area. Eligibility, you have the option of selecting between none, eligible for services, eligible by other factors, or not eligible. A feeder pattern percentage, this is for LE information purposes only. The adjusted enrollment number, so what you would be adjusting here is what you see over here on your far left where it says provided enrollment number, that says 476. If I'm going to adjust that, that's where I'm going to adjust it here under the adjusted enrollment number. And then, as with the adjusted number of low-income students, it's the same number you see here on the far left, but if I want to adjust it, I can adjust it here on the right. So we're going to adjust some of these today, and I'm just playing around. There's no specific reason what I'm doing. I'm just going to play around. So I'm going to adjust their enrollment to 500 students, and I'm going to change their adjusted number of low-income students to 250. Okay. Now, after I save this, you'll notice that these percentages change. Okay, so right now it matches what you see here on the far left, but after I save it, that will change based off of what that percentage calculates to. Okay, we're going to change a couple other things here as well. So I'm going to knock that down to 200, and I'm going to say that this is 150. So just playing around, nothing, no rhyme or reason behind this. I'm just making this so that you guys can see what happens on your end. I'm going to say 50, and then I think I just like things in a nice round atmosphere, I guess, because that's all it looks like what I'm doing here. Just making them nice and even. So not huge differences, but somewhat of a difference, okay? So now that I've adjusted my enrollment number and my low income number, again, you don't have to adjust this if it's not necessary to adjust this. It will keep the numbers that are here on the far left in those areas, in those fields. Some other areas that that I'm going to take care of here is in the eligibility. I'm going to mark eligible for services. This doesn't drive anything in the future in the forms that are upcoming. It's this field over here called services that does, but I am just going to I'm going to just mark these all eligible for services just to make this easier. Okay, so here in services, this is where this drives what you will see when we get to the form that's called school allocation form. So if you mark any of these things that say none, it will not appear on your school allocation form. If you mark this already in existence, new, TA, or new school, and I'm going to ask Becky and Val.
It's already in existence.
Yeah, so what is school-wide? Mm-hmm. So SW stands for school-wide. Mm-hmm. TA stands for?
Targeted assistance.
Targeted assistance. So school-wide already in existence and school-wide new, targeted assistance, and targeted assistance new school. As for these up above, I don't know what does NESS stand for?
Necessarily existent small school.
Okay, necessarily existent small school. Mm-hmm. RTCC stands for?
A residential treatment center.
Okay, and YIC stands for?
Youth in custody.
Youth in custody, okay. Just so you know what those acronyms mean, there you have them. Okay, I'm going to mark these as already in existence for the most part. Some of these I'm going to change to none or no services, just so that you see that this does not populate on that school allocation form. So I'm just doing it on that Minersville school. not trying to be rude or mean in any sort of way, just trying to show you what happens in future forms, okay? All right, school improvement status. Here you've got a couple of options. Becky, what does CSI achievement stand for?
CSI Achievement, those are schools in improvement under the Every Student Succeeds Act. They are in the lowest 5% of Title I schools in the state.
Okay.
CSI graduation rate, that is any public high school with an average graduation rate less than 67%. TSI, those are targeted support and improvement schools that have been identified because they have one or more specific student groups that are not performing well. And then turnaround is part of the state turnaround and leadership development project through the state legislature.
Thank you. For today's example, I'm not going to mark anything here in the school improvement status area, just because this doesn't drive anything in a future form. But I wanted Becky to mention what each one of those stood for in case you didn't know what the acronym meant. Okay, so now that I have adjusted what I wanted to adjust here in the adjusted enrollment number and the adjusted number of low income, I'm going to go ahead and click the Save button on the same line as you see building eligibility. And we'll give that just a second to save. Okay, so now you can see that, sorry, it has to actually refresh. You can see that things have changed. So you can see on Belknap School that the percentage used to be 48.95 and now it's 50. And then Milford is now 75%. Minersville is 50%. So you can just see that going down, that those percentages have changed based off of what I put in here. If I need to make an additional adjustment here, again, I just click on the blue pencil and I'm able to make that adjustment. I'll hit save after I've done so and then go forward. Okay, down here in the totals area, you can see that it's picked up those numbers from what we've adjusted it to. So you've got 1,650 in your total enrollment, which comes right here from our adjusted enrollment number. This total number of low income students number is 800, which is coming from this column here, adjusted number of low income. And the percentage here has been updated based off of those two numbers. The calculation between those two numbers is now 48.48%. Okay, I have now completed the building eligibility form, so I'm going to mark as complete. And then as we come back to this main page, you can see that that box has been marked complete right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the launch set-asides form. And again, I'm just going to click on the blue letters, which is a link that gets me inside that form. Okay, so the total allocation amount for Beaver School District is $150,000. Based off of the calculation that we had done on that prior page, this PPA rule, it's either 100% or 125% rule. So based off of a calculation, we are doing the 125% rule. I'm going to have Becky explain this real quick what that means.
If an LEA chooses to serve any school with a poverty rate less than 35%, then the 125% per pupil allocation rule applies. If the LEA does not serve any schools below the 35% poverty threshold, which is Title I was designed to serve schools that had at least 35% poverty, then they will have the 100% per pupil allocation rule.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here and I am going to make adjustments to this based off of what I done on the prior form. So I'm going to click Edit here in the top right corner, and it will open up the fields that I'm allowed to edit. So you can see that I need to take care of required set-asides and optional set-asides, and then we've got some totals down at the bottom. Okay. So I am just going to throw some numbers in here just to have some fun. There is really, again, no rhyme or reason to what I'm doing. Just as a side note, you will notice that these little red asterisks right here at the end of some of the lines, those are required. So I am required, if those red asterisks appear, I actually need to put a dollar amount here in those particular areas. So I'm going to actually have to put some money in here on the homeless line. I'm going to put 100. And then neglected and delinquent also is a required field, so I'm going to put another 100 there.
Could you change that to the PPA?
To the PPA?
Yeah. Those
To-
need to be at least the
to this-
minimum.
Yeah,
Just
that has to be
234?
at least the minimum PPA, which
Okay.
is 234.36.
Okay. So I will make
Not
sure,
that one,
not that one.
the two rest.
So these two, are you saying that the total of these 5 areas have to equal that 234? Or is
No.
it just that both of these have to say 234.38?
Yes.
I am so thankful that these ladies are here today. So, if you didn't catch that on both of these lines, they have to match what this PPA rule is right here.
Well, they could be more. but
They
at
have to
least
be
that.
at least.
Yes,
Okay,
for
so-
homeless and neglected and delinquent is a new one under the Every Student Succeeds Act. You must set aside at least the minimum per pupil allocation.
Okay.
If you know you have, a number of students who are experiencing homelessness, you can set aside additional funding.
Okay.
If you don't use the funding throughout the course of the year, then you just repurpose it for other needs that you have.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. So I've adjusted those, and then I'm going to come down here to optional set-asides, and I'm going to make some I'm going to add some funds in these areas as well. Okay, I'm going to put some in foster care, and I'm going to put some in this early learning. So, okay, I'm going to hit the save button, and it's going to make its adjustments here. Okay, and you can see now that the bottom here, it says the total set aside is $1,359.38. That is an addition of all that you see up above here, probably from the required set asides on down. Okay, all right. I've completed this form, and I can now mark it as complete. And then we are going to move on to the next form. All right, we are now going to go, and again, you can see right here that that's complete because I have a check marks in the complete box. Okay, we're going to go to the school allocation form. I'm going to select that by clicking on the blue letters, which is a link. And we will jump inside this form. Okay, if you can remember from the very, very first form, which was the building eligibility form, there were 2 areas that I selected as none under the services. You notice that they do not appear here. Okay, so again, if you select school-wide already in existence, school-wide new, TA is what again?
Targeted assistance.
Targeted assistance and targeted assistance new school. If I select one of those 4 services, they will appear here in the school allocation grid for me to then take that remaining amount of money of $148,000 and change and allocate it between the 4 of them. So that's what this form is actually doing, okay? So again, just be aware that if you on that services, if you don't select one of those 4, it will not appear in this grid. Okay, so to make adjustments to this, I'm going to simply click on the pencil, and I'm going to put numbers in here. So what I'm going to do here is I believe it takes whatever I put in this column and it times it by this adjusted low income number public. Okay, so because we have $148,000 that we have to allocate, I'm going to put in a really large number.
Talk about. Because this school, actually Belknap has a higher poverty rate, but because you were playing around with the numbers, Milford School now shows up as the school with the highest poverty rate.
Yes.
And so we want to fund those in order. So in actuality, Belknap would receive a higher PPA per pupil allocation than Milford. But because of this scenario, Milford is going to receive a higher PPA than the other schools because their school has a higher poverty rate and has more need.
Okay.
Yes,
So
so when we're reviewing applications, we're going to be looking carefully at this page. So if you're a large LEA and you have a number of schools and say your highest poverty school has 93% poverty, and then the lowest poverty school that you're going to serve with Title I funding has 40% poverty. You need to differentiate that per pupil allocation as you go down that list so that you're not giving the school with 40% poverty the same per pupil allocation as the school at the top of the list that has 93% poverty. Title I is meant to be concentrated in the highest poverty schools. And in the past, we've had LEAs that have just divided it up and giving every school the same. We're going to be really watching for that and sending applications back if there's not some level of differentiation of that per pupil allocation. If, however, you have a group of schools that are clustering, say you have a group of schools that are all in the 80% poverty or a group that are in around 60%, you don't have to differentiate for every single school. You can do it in bands. So you have a band of your highest poverty schools, and then there's another band that gets a little bit less, and then another band of schools that gets a little bit less than that. But you do need to show us that you're doing some differentiation to concentrate resources in your highest need schools.
Thank you. So what Val was mentioning here is that you can see that it's rated them by percentage here, again based off of what we did on that very, very first on the building eligibility form. Okay, so I'm going to start entering in some dollar amounts. So I'm going to put 1,000 in here, and that didn't like that. I guess you can't click out of that. Okay, we'll just go to the next one, and I'm going to put 750. That's going to take me way over, so I'm going to knock that down. Okay, we're going to play around here a little bit. And just so you know, when you play around with this, it's going to take more than just one time to do this, just because, again, it's taking a dollar amount, timesing it by the adjusted. So I'm going to hit save real quick, just so that you see. Oh, it took my original 1,000. That's great. And now I can't edit. Yes, I can. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to adjust this down because I've obviously gone over my dollar amount that I need to there. And we have questions coming in, and we will answer those questions.
I think if you have a PPA of 234, then you're probably not going to be able to spend that much at the middle school, the
Okay.
Belknap, the Minersville, the Milford.
Okay.
You're going to
All
have
right.
to do much.
Okay. So what I'm trying to do here is that dollar amount that you see right here under the school allocation total, that has to be within $100 plus or minus of the available for allocation. So you can see I am way over. So I've got some serious adjusting to do here. So let's get some adjusting going on. And this will take some time because you have to click it and then you have to save it and then you have to see where you're at that point in time. And I am just nowhere near where I need to be. Okay, we're getting slightly closer. Apologize that you have to sit here and sit through this. This is fun. And they don't have to be even like what I am doing. This is just me being weird because that's just what happens sometimes. Slowly getting there. All right. Okay, so you can see that we're getting closer, but still not close enough.
So this might be something you'd want to do outside of the system and do some, calculations, see how you can get that to kind of balance out.
Right.
And also, it should be needs driven.
Right. I don't know what is needed in each of these
Right.
areas. So
Right.
I am a super bad example as to what you're supposed to do here. This is very much needs driven. This is not what I am putting in here to get to show you what's going
but
on.
just so you keep in mind that as you go down your rank ordered list, for example, Milford Elementary has a higher poverty rate than who was next to them? Belknap. So you cannot give Belknap Elementary a higher per pupil allocation in this case than you would give Milford. You have to do it in your rank order from highest poverty to lowest. So you can't skip down and say, oh, well, I know that this school really has, this need for this particular thing, and so I'm going to give them extra money, and I'm going to give this other school less money because I don't feel they need quite as much. You have to serve them in that rank order. That's part of the federal statute. So there's no way around that.
We're getting closer.
Yeah, I would stay with that.
Okay, we are super close.
Knock the high school down by like $1.
All right, we have come within the 100 plus or minus that we need to. So I apologize for that you had to watch that. Okay, so now that the remaining to be allocated, it's okay that it is a negative here because again it can be a plus or minus $100. I'm going to go ahead and mark this as complete. Okay, so now that I have all three forms marked as complete, I can now click on this back button up here. Either one works. I'm going to click on the back button. And you can now see that on the data forms that the Title I form is now at 100%. So if there was any time during this that I got interrupted and I needed to walk away from what I was doing, it would save it where you were at and then you could come back and complete it. It's not like you have to get it done or else you lose your information. It will save what you have, okay? All right, the other thing that we're going to talk about is this private school form. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the blue pencil. And in the private school form, you can see that there's a couple of different areas. So the first one is there's this little checkbox that says private school data is not applicable. So I would assume that I would mark that if the private school information wasn't applicable. If it was applicable, I would definitely take that back out and fill in what I needed to. I'm going to leave that marked for today's purposes. On the example that we gave you in the instructions, the hand instructions, that was on a different school district that I had taken those screen prints from. So if in your school district, if you're finding stuff here under this LEA private school funding status, you would have some fields to fill in here, and it would simply be a participation field you would see right here. There's a drop down, and in that field you would either select none, you would select contacted participating, contacted non-participating, contacted refused consultation, not participating, or participating. In the comments, you'd be able to enter in comments there. If you needed to add a school, you would put that information down here. But as there's nothing, my example is I don't have any private school funding status that I need to complete, so I'm going to just leave that marked as the data is not applicable. I'm going to click Save, and it's going to take me back to the attachments. Should take me back to the attachments area. Let's get back there. There we go. So we're back to the attachments tab. You can now see that both of these forms have been completed. Now that they've been completed, I am going to click on this Validate button. And this is an error message that you will get if you don't complete this 100%. It says all the forms should be 100% completed, entering required data, and I missed the last part of that, required data to proceed to the next step. So for today's example, we have this MOE form, which is not applicable or a form that you have to fill out for Title I. This just happens to be something that got added in this particular testing environment, so you will not see it when you complete your attachments. Please be aware of that. That's the reason why I can't complete this at this point in time, is because I need to complete this form, which I am not going to do because it has nothing to do with Title I. So we'll pretend that I clicked validate and that I didn't have that form and that it all was 100%. I would then be complete with my data forms. Something that you're not seeing here is the attachments from Grantor. There are 2 attachments that you guys have to complete as part of the Title I application. We did discover on one of them that it's question G, that the yes and no does not work. Like, you can't click the little box for yes or no. So you'll see yes or no, and then there'll be some verbiage in red writing underneath that. If you'll just put yes or no, and then if it's no, I think you have to explain why.
Yes.
So.
And that's on the LEA plan.
Yeah, so those 2 attachments, one is the LEA risk self-assessment that has to be completed, and the other one is the LEA Title I plan. So Tracy was referring to a question G on it's a fillable PDF form. The PDF function wasn't working on that particular question, so you'll need to write in yes or no. You must respond to each one of the items on that LEA Title I plan. You will notice if you're a small LEA that it's only serving one school, or you're a charter LEA and you're a single campus, some of those questions will be not applicable, and in that case there will be a box you can check that says NA, because that particular provision in the law does not pertain to you because you're a one building, one campus LEA.
Okay, perfect. Just as a side note for everybody, there is a difference between data forms and attachments from Grantor, okay? And the difference is these forms are, you're going to click on the action buttons over here on the right to access them. On the attachments from Grantor, which this is not a great example that you see here, you would most likely have a little orange cloud like you see up here, but would appear on this line here. You would click on that for it to download. You would fill it out. You'd fill out the fillable PDA, as Becky just mentioned, and after you've done filling it out, you would save it. Most likely, just save it to your desktop or save it somewhere on your computer. And then what you're going to do is attachments for Grantor. You would click on the Add button, and then you would upload it so that it would appear there. Okay. So please know that there's a difference between the 2. These ones, again, forms. You're going to click on the action items. Either the blue pencil or the green eye, and on the attachments for Grantor, you're going to click on an orange cloud with the arrow going downward. On these data forms, if you click on these orange clouds, all you're doing is downloading the forms. You will not be able to save them and reattach them and have this application work. Okay? You won't be able to hit the validate button and have it show 100%. You have to complete these either be clicking the blue pencil or the green eye. Okay, there were questions that have been asked, and so we're going to answer those questions at this time.
Okay, the first question is, am I correct that only the grant application owner can view and edit the forms?
Yes. So, okay, yes and no, okay? So as a grant owner, the owner would be most likely be the one who comes in here and makes these edits. Again, blue pencil, green eyeball, okay? They would be the one who does that. To view an application that you don't want to be an owner, I'm going to show you what you do. And to do that, I'm going to duplicate my screen so that I don't move away from that particular example, okay? So if I want to view an application, I'm going to simply click on Applications at the top. I'm going to find that application, and so we're looking for 202T1FT. I'm going to look for it here, and I'm going to click on this green eye. You'll notice that there's a blue pencil because I'm still logged in as Randy Hunter, and he's the owner of this application. In your scenario, you most likely would not see that blue pencil if you were not the owner, okay? So I'm going to click on the green eye.
Go back and change anything, but
and I would be able to come in here, and I could see, and I believe I could see things. I just wouldn't be able to save things again. The owner's the person who makes these edits for it to save. If you want to view it, that's fine. You're just not going to be doing anything that will save. Okay?
I mean, I have no clue what's happened.
Okay, the next question is, I hit save on the building eligibility form, but I did not complete the form correctly. How can I get the form to reopen so I can edit the form?
Okay, so we're going to jump back into those forms.
So I don't know.
This is a great question. So to go back into the form, and you said the building eligibility form, simply click back on the, if you're back on this screen here, simply click on the blue link where it says building eligibility form, and you can make your adjustments as need be. So if, you know, I'm not going to make adjustments here, but you'd make your adjustments by clicking on the blue pencil to open up these fields over here. And then you would hit save. There would be a save button right here on this line. And then after you saved it, you would hit back, and it would take you back to this screen right here. And actually, I am going to adjust something just to show you guys what happens in regards to those complete areas. I am going to change this one because I know it didn't get adjusted somewhere else. So I'm going to adjust these numbers. And I'm picking this one because I know that it didn't get selected on that school allocation form because I selected none, no services. So I've made my adjustment. I'm going to hit save. The record has been saved. Need to wait for the page to refresh. I'm going to mark as complete.
I mean, you might call
and then I want you guys to pay attention to what just happened right here. So before I went in there, all three of those were marked as complete. Now that I have touched this first one, I actually have to go back into the next two and mark as complete again. Okay? So just as an FYI, if you do that, you do have to complete the other ones that are thereafter. Okay? All right. Next question.
Okay, the next question, and Tracy, if you would go to the allocation page.
Okay.
The question said, don't you need to also meet the minimum allocation amount in the column for each of the schools? And that is yes. You can adjust the PPA, but you should meet that because your minimum per pupil allocation is set up as you go through those other forms. So when Tracy entered in that amount for homeless students and neglected and delinquent students, that was the minimum PPA. So you'll see here on this, Milford Elementary has a minimum allocation there of, I can't, 26,470 and 50 cents. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and you can see when Tracy put in the actual per pupil allocation, they're actually going to get more than that. But yes, you do need to meet the minimum per pupil allocation.
So what you're saying is here on this Milford, the minimum was 17,000, but I only put in 10,000, correct? So that's That's wrong.
Yes.
So the form actually didn't recognize that, obviously.
Yeah, the form didn't give you an error message,
Nope.
and I didn't catch that because I'm having a hard time seeing it.
Right. But you guys would be paying attention to that when you do your review of these applications. Great question.
The next question is regarding indirect costs.
Okay.
So the question is, did the indirect costs get resolved? I know that the amount left after allocating funds for schools left the indirect cost as amount remaining to be allocated. So what was determined on that is when you do the allocations page, I think it is.
The budget page?
Or the budget, no, not the budget page.
Okay.
It's one of the forms.
Okay. Let me get
The set-asides page. Rebecca Nielsen of Utah Grants determined that on the set-aside form, you have a box down there under optional set-asides that says other. You have several boxes that say other. Put your indirect cost rate amount in there, and then it will not show up when you get to the per pupil allocation page. So it looks like you have this huge amount and you can't get down to the $100 threshold. So please put it there. We sent out a message to the Title I directors several days ago, but I know sometimes you get a lot of messages and it's hard to sort through them, or maybe the right person didn't get the message. So please put those on the set-aside page in one of the other boxes. The next question is just talking about the screen looking blurry, so that was to our studio staff here. Oh, someone needs to mute their mic. Okay, the next one. I am an approver and I cannot see the forms in my Utah Grants instant. Is that by design?
So as an approver, you would get this to be approved after it was submitted to you by the owner of the application. So this application is not completed because I haven't done the requirements back here on the overview tab, the project abstract, the budget. But after the owner completes all aspects of this application, they would submit it for approval, and then the internal approver, and in this case, that would be Todd Burke, he would get an email saying, this is now ready for you to approve, and it would direct him as to where to go. It would most likely say, go to applications, pending tasks, click the green play button, and you can then approve it. So when you go in to approve it, of course, you'd be able to see what the owner of the application completed, what they put in here. So you'd be able to see in the overview section what they wrote for the project abstract, what was in the budget, and especially what's in the attachments. You could come here, and as the internal approver, I would suggest maybe using this download form to look at it, or even just viewing it by clicking the green eyeball. I don't believe you will have edit rights. If you do, I would strongly suggest you don't edit it, because you're not the owner of the application, and we don't want to have the roles switched up here and not get this to go through the process the correct way. So again, as an internal approver, when you get to the attachments, you can view them by clicking the green eyeball and or possibly clicking on this download form to look at what the owner of the application filled out.
One other question about indirect costs. The question is, do we leave it there, the indirect costs, in the other box on the set-asides page, or change it later? Yes, you will leave it there on your set-asides page in the other. And then when you get to that per pupil allocation page, it will remove it so you can get down to within that $100 window of allocating your funds. The other questions that we've received have to do with people saying that their screen looks blurry and the director of our studio here says if you have a webcam turned on for the WebEx, turn it off, and that should improve your bandwidth and hopefully improve the clarity of the screen, because what we're seeing here in the studio is clear. So Jerry is saying that it's your webcam, perhaps it's messing up your view of the screen.
We want to talk about how to fill out the overview. On there, you click the overview tab. And there's summary.
Are you talking about the project abstract?
Yeah.
Okay. So Val would like us to talk about this, how to fill out this particular part of the application. So we are on the overview tab, and I'm going to click the edit button. I can either click the button at the top or the bottom. Both will do the exact same thing. So as soon as I click that and the page refreshes, it will allow me to edit that field. Okay. So here I can come in and I can actually type in my project description or project abstract. Okay.
And what we are looking for there is, what is your Title I program going to do to improve student outcomes? Purpose of Title I is to provide students with high quality, equitable opportunities for a high quality education to close achievement gaps. So what we want to see here is this is not your place for the budget narrative where you say, well, we're going to spend $100,000 to buy iPads, right? That doesn't have anything to do with what are you going to do to improve student outcome. How are you going to close those achievement gaps among your student groups? So you need to tell us what are you designing within your program to meet the needs of the students in your LEA, and what programs and processes and supports will be put in place to support those students.
Another question. Turn on your mic.
Okay, the next question is, are you going to go over the LEA plan?
The LEA plan. I'm assuming
You didn't have that attachment.
I did not have that attachment. I can. Val, do
Maybe
you have
email
that?
it
Can
to
you
you.
email? Yes.
Yeah.
Val's going to email that to me so that we can go over that if that would be helpful for everyone. And I apologize. Sometimes working in a testing environment, things work and sometimes things don't work. So thankfully it's in the testing environment and not in real life where it makes a huge difference.
Tracy, while Val is emailing that application to you, we have another question.
Okay.
This individual says, I am not able to edit our application in any way. It looks as though it was revised and then created by someone else in our LEA. If this is the case, how can that be fixed?
So if it was an application that was, it would depend on who the owner of the application is. That's the main thing here. So whoever the owner of the application is the one who has to make the edits and is the only one who's allowed to make edits. So I would suggest figuring out who that owner is, and you can do that by looking at the overview page. It will tell you who your owner of your application is. If it's your name, then you should be able to go in and edit. If it's not your name, then you need to work with that person who has that role at that point in time. If it's something that you see here that maybe has a bunch of, it says sub Q and a bunch of numbers afterwards, what that means is that you haven't owned the application yet. That you need to go to Applications, Pending Tasks, and click. I'm going to show you on this page. So I'm going to Applications, Pending Tasks, and you need to make sure you're clicking on a green arrow, a green sideways triangle, okay? That actually starts the application, as you can see here, as I've got my cursor hovered over it. That's where you start the application. By simply clicking on Application and seeing a green eyeball, That does nothing. That's viewing only, okay? So a couple of different possibilities here. If you are the owner and you're having edit problems, I'm going to encourage you to call the help desk at this point in time, and we can assist you there to figure out exactly what's going on.
Give them that number.
And that number, if you give me just 1 second, I don't have it memorized. All right, that number is 801-538-7604. And the email as well?
No.
Oh, okay, no.
Email.
Okay, I should have the email is what you said. Okay. Let me get into my emails real quick. And we will go through this form. All right. Okay, so here is the fillable form for the LEA plan requirements. I'm trying to make it bigger so that you can see it. So there's an overview here, and then it has some other information, some resources. Okay, so as we jump down into the second page,
Not really.
this is where you would make adjustments to your plan. So, Val, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I wish I had been prepared for this, but we'll just wing it because Tracy's been doing such an awesome job describing the Title I application. I think some people got confused when they tried to get ahead of the Title I application on Utah Grants and fill this out, because as it appears, they were confused about the description column, thinking they had to fill in a description, when in fact the fourth and final column is the only one that you will insert text or respond to. So each of these sections is directly from the Every Student Succeeds Act, and you will only have to complete this one time and then make adjustments if you make changes each year. Some people are trying to go back and match this with the UCA. This was not in the UCA. What we were asking you to do, you should continue to do at the LEA level, and do a needs assessment, create a plan. But this is, how are you meeting the ESSA requirements? So in section 1112 of the ESSA, it is asking how the LEA will monitor students' progress in meeting challenging state academic standards. So each of those bullet points you will respond to as they apply to your LEA. How will you monitor students' progress when developing and implementing a well-rounded program of instruction? This is going to take some time and some thought, but it should also already be implemented, so you're just describing what you're already doing. In the second section, it is asking you to identify, I lied, in this section 2, you will have to respond in the second column and select the programs that your LEA operates. So if you have both school-wide and targeted assistance programs in your LEA, you would click that third box, as Tracy's doing. And then you would describe how is your school-wide or targeted assistance programs operated? What is it that you do? And this is where your school plans, you may summarize those school plans in this area. Again, just follow the bullets and they will guide you through your responses. In section 3, the LEA describes how, under the state plan, any disparities that result in low-income students and minority students being taught at higher rates than other students. So this would require you to look at the distribution of state qualified teachers. And
You will note there, if you're a one building LEA, then that box would not be applicable to your LEA.
In section 4, again, this is a second column you will have to fill in. How do you determine the poverty criteria? Do you use just free lunch, or do you use free and reduced price lunch? Or some charters use other information. So if you click on that third box, other, then in the description in that fourth column, you would describe what other criteria you use. Section 5, you're going to describe where appropriate educational services outside Title I schools for children living in local institutions for neglected or delinquent children and for community day programs are provided. So if this is not applicable, you could put NA in that response column. Section 6, describe the services the LEA will provide to homeless children and youth. This is something that if you have homeless youth, you've already had experience with, and you would describe what it is that you do. If this does not apply to your LEA, again, please put NA. In section 7, describe the strategy the LEA will use to implement effective parent and family engagement under section 1116. Almost all of you revised your parent and family engagement policy last year, so in this area you could put down a summary of that policy. You could also put down how it is you consult with parents in the creation of that policy or in the creation of engagement activities. In section 8, describe, if applicable, how the LEA will support, coordinate, and integrate services provided under this part with early childhood education programs at the LEA or individual school level. Again, this is something that you've already been doing. You can just describe it. If it's not something you've been doing, this might be an opportunity for you to explore how it is you integrate those services. In section 9, describe how the LEA will implement strategies to facilitate effective transitions for students from middle grades to high school. Now, if this is something that you haven't been doing because just your elementary schools receive Title I funding, you could describe how you're doing this anyway. It's something that all LEAs that have multiple schools, that have middle schools and high schools, should be doing anyway. So describe what it is that you have been doing, or if your LEA has come up with a new plan, what it is that you will implement. In section 10, describe how the local education agency will support efforts to reduce the overuse of discipline practices that remove students from the classroom. Again, looking at the data, what do those data describe? Okay, we have a change of microphone, so hopefully this helps. In section 10, once again, describe how the local education agency will support efforts to reduce the overuse of discipline practices that remove students from the classroom. And that should include how does your LEA help schools use data to inform their disciplinary practices, and how those disciplinary practices may affect different student groups in an unfair, differentiated way. Section 11, if applicable, please describe the LEA's support for programs that coordinate and integrate the following. Again, we're looking for as many opportunities to combine efforts. In section 12, describe any other information on how the LEA proposes to use funds to meet the purpose of this part, and that the LEA determines appropriate to provide, which may include how the LEA will assist schools in identifying and serving gifted and talented students. Now remember, if this is coming under Title I, this should make sure that all different student groups are being included at the same rate. Developing effective school library programs to provide students an opportunity to develop digital literacy skills.
Again, what has been done? What are you proposing to do? What changes do you want to make? These all go in the LEA response boxes. The final one that we ask you to make a response for, section 13, is, if applicable, describe how the LEA will carry out its responsibilities to support and improve schools that have been identified as CSI or TSI. Then all the other ones are assurances. We know that you have to respond to a list of assurances. These are in addition to those assurances that you make for the state of Utah. So for Title I, you go through each of these and you assure that your LEA is in fact in compliance with each of these sections. You mark yes if you are in assurance, you mark no if you're not. Now if you're not, you need to respond. And then as we review these applications, if you're saying we're not in compliance, but by this date we will be, then we can be in communication with you to make sure you receive the support you need to resolve any issue that's not in compliance. You continue to do this for all the sections. And then I want Tracy to stop on section G, just so we reiterate, this is the section that has caused some people some problems. You can see she can't click on that. And so just in that box, she's going to respond to that assurance by typing either yes or no. And if she types no, then she needs to create the text to respond to the reason why. Okay, continue to do that for all of the assurances until you get to the letter Q, which is on page 11, and that is the last assurance. Now, if there's any section that you're not sure of what it means, then you're free to email or call us, and that information is on the website. Is there anything else you want to add, Becky?
Thank you, Val. We have some additional questions. Tracy, could you go back to that allocation page in the application? So we have a question here again about this person indicates that they're confused about the actual allocation PPA and what needs to go in that field. So your minimum per pupil allocation is listed up above, right? So in this case, it's $176.47. What you're going to determine is what is the actual per pupil allocation you're going to allocate to each of those schools. And as we said earlier, if Milford Elementary School has the highest poverty in your school, then that per pupil allocation should be higher than, for example, Milford High School that has a much lower poverty rate. So what you're going to put in that actual allocation PPA is the amount per low-income student you are going to award to that particular building. And then that will create the school total allocation amount once you save the page. The next question, this one is for Tracy. How can you tell who the owner is of the application?
Great question. So, as you go back to, get back there quick, or as quick as the system wants to let me get back there. On your overview page, in the application overview section, you have your owner, and for this example, it's Randy Hunter, and my internal approver, Todd Burke. Okay, so that's how I know who the owner is, because it will say on the overview page, under the application overview, and there's a small area where it says owner and who the owner is. Okay. Side note, if you ever do need to change your internal approver, this is where you would change it. I would simply click on the edit button. And here, what I would need to do is, Todd Burke's name is appearing here. I actually need to get his name completely out of that field and then click on the magnifying glass to show anybody who is able to approve that. And that brings up a list of those folks. So in this situation, I could select Ray Terry to be the internal approver instead of Todd Burke. After I do that, of course, I'm going to hit save. And when I complete this application and submit it for approval, it will now go to Ray Terry and not Todd Burke. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
One more question. This is on what does the feeder pattern percentage on the Title I form refer to? This was one of the changes from No Child Left Behind to the Every Student Succeeds Act. In the past, and it's still the case, any school that has 75% poverty or higher must be served by Title I funding, including a high school. But under the Every Student Succeeds Act, they made a provision in there. So, for example, let's say you have some elementary schools that are high poverty schools that are feeding into a high school, and the high school's poverty rate may be less than 75%. And so typically you would say, well, I don't need to serve that high school. And typically high schools have, so many students that it's going to take a large allocation. What you can do there is if those elementary schools are above 50% poverty, then you can assume that that high school is going to have at least 50% poverty. So you could make that high school eligible based on that feeder pattern and say that that high school has 50% poverty. You don't have to do that. It's optional. So you do not need to worry about filling that out unless that's something that you would choose to do. The next question is, can an editor be added so that more than just the person who's the owner can make edits?
Unfortunately, the system does not allow for that to happen. There is one owner and there is one internal approver. A way to work around this is if you worked together. So if there's multiple people, more than one person, that needs to complete an application, set aside some time where the both of you can get together, or if there's more than two people, a group of you can get together and work on the application together. Again, the system doesn't allow for more than one owner on an application and more than one internal approver.
Okay, the next question, Val, is could you review number 4 on the plan again?
Okay, this has to do with how do you, what criteria do you use to identify the number of children that are experiencing poverty? Do you use just free lunch? That would be a lower percentage. Sometimes LEAs with schools that are highly impacted just use free because that helps them differentiate from the schools that have maybe reduced rates for lunch. So you could use just free lunch. You could use both free and reduced lunch. That's the most common. Or you could use another indicator.
Yes, and some of the other indicators you can use are how many students are coming from families that are receiving temporary aid for needing families. Are their children receiving Medicaid services? Sometimes there are schools in communities that are very high poverty, and the LEA chooses to work with the child nutrition program staff here at USVE, and they put certain schools on what we call the community eligibility provision, which lasts for a period of about 4 years. And in that case, if the school is eligible, and it's based on things like TANF and Medicaid and those other kinds of situations that families might be receiving other kinds of government assistance, then basically the entire school becomes 100% eligible for free lunch program prices. And so the school then does not need to send home the school lunch eligibility forms and have parents fill those out during the time that the school is participating in the community eligibility provision. And we do have a few schools in the state within LEAs that are participating in that. If you only have 1 or 2 schools doing it and you have other schools that are not, then it pushes the entire LEA into using the 125% per pupil allocation, because it will skew your rank order. So you may have a school that's actual poverty rate, maybe it's 88%, but if it's doing community eligibility, then it's going to bump up and look as if it's 100%. But there may be a school right under that that's actually 92%. So that school actually, in essence, has a higher poverty rate than this other school that's participating in community eligibility provision. So there is guidance that comes from the U.S. Department of Education, as well as the United States Department of Agriculture, which is what our child nutrition programs work under. And there are people in the child nutrition program staff here that can assist LEAs if you are interested and think you have schools that are eligible to certify under that community eligibility program. For most LEAs in Utah, they use free and reduced lunch price. We do have 1 or 2 LEAs that use strictly free lunch because they have a large number of schools and quite a few that are high poverty. So they choose to really target their Title I funding to those most highly at-risk schools.
All right. I think we have answered all the questions that have come across thus far. So at this point in time, we are going to end this webinar. We appreciate you, those that asked questions. Those were great questions that I'm sure will help lots of other people. And we hope this helps you. If not, please, again, feel free to call the help desk for Utah Grants for questions in regards to specifics on the form inside of here, like if things aren't working, such and so forth. For like the question that was just answered in regards to the feeder pattern, that would be needed to be directed towards the Title I folks like Becky, Val, Sandy, Tammy, as they know those answers, where Utah Grants does not understand the ins and outs of Title I. So hopefully that will be helpful for you to differentiate who you need to contact if you have those types of questions. Thank you and have a great day.